TCS TV viewers, it's Dave and Evelyn coming to you from the camera store. Today we're going to talk about the Nikon mirrorless Z9.
Not only is it their first flagship camera in the Z mount, but it also doesn't have a shutter.
Yes, and it's packed with a ton of new technology. We're going to get into it today. Dave and I just wrapped a week-long experience shooting with a pre-production Nikon Z9.
Now, we've had a great time with it. This is their flagship high-end jack-of-all-trades camera, featuring a brand new 45 megapixel backside illuminated sensor and the ability to shoot 20 frames per second in RAW plus JPEGs.
And not only is it backside illuminated, it's also stacked, and so it's a very fast scanning sensor. It promises to replace the idea of having a mechanical shutter altogether. They've also jam-packed a lot of technology for both the photo and the video side, which Drew is very excited about. So we'll get him on camera later talking about that. But the main thing Dave and I are going to dig into is a lot of the tests that we're able to put it through.
We put this camera through a lot of very challenging situations, and there's a lot of really good stuff about it, so let's get into it.
The Nikon Z9 is built like a flagship camera, and so it has a little bit more substantial weight to it compared to a lot of the other top-end mirrorless cameras that we've seen. And I'm okay with that. I think that it's very well balanced, especially for people that might be adapting other Nikon lenses. This camera is built to the same kind of weather sealing specifications as the D6, the flagship DSLR camera. And that's a good thing because you're able to take this camera in a lot of different shooting environments. I had no worries being at the pool if we were going to get splashed when we were doing some of our tests. I also like that this camera has two memory card slots that are the CF Express Type B cards. They have some very fast cards on the market right now and are promising to get even better. It's also backwards compatible with XQD memory cards, and so for people that are moving up through the lineup from the DSLR or other cameras, they'll be able to have that cross compatibility. On the battery side of things, we have a battery that has a CP rating of about 740 shots, give or take. However, we got a lot more shots than that. This feels like a Nikon camera. It's that classic, well-designed, very ergonomic experience, and it has a lot of custom controls to it. Yes, some of the buttons are dedicated to certain functions, but there is enough customizability, I think, for most users to be able to have that professional experience when you're shooting this camera. Another unique feature that Nikon has implemented on this camera is a four-way tiltable screen. It's not fully articulating, but the unique thing about this is that you can shoot in either horizontal or portrait orientation. And so I found that even if I was getting down super low, whatever orientation I was shooting in, I could tilt that screen up and it gave me a lot of different viewing angles. It also feels like it's an incredibly durable screen. I mean, this is on like these metal hinges, and so I feel like you could, I didn't do it, but you could just like pick the camera and just like shake it from those hinges and it'd probably be fine. But yeah, this camera is definitely built with durability, customizability, and professional performance in mind from every aspect of the design of the camera. Let's talk about the viewfinder though. So this is where the camera is getting a little bit of shit on because it has a 3.69 million dot electronic viewfinder. But I do have to say that the experience of this viewfinder is actually quite good. It's very bright. It's one of the brightest viewfinders that I've ever used. They call it 3000 nits, and we don't usually talk about nits with viewfinders, but it's something that they're calling attention to. They also say that it has this dual stream technology, and so there's a dedicated pipeline, if you will, that's sending the information while you're shooting to the electronic viewfinder so that you have blackout-free shooting. I'm actually going to go ahead and say that although this is a lower resolution compared to some other cameras with 3.69 million dot resolution EVF, this is one of the best electronic viewfinder experiences that I've had. I found that the brightness, and maybe it had to do something with the dual stream technology, made the whole experience really good. And so I have no complaints about the electronic viewfinder, and I'm actually not the only one to think this, so we'll get more into that later.
Now, the heart of the Z9 is a brand new sensor. Now, this is a bit of a departure from flagships for Nikon. If we look at the previous generations of the D5 and the D6, they were relatively low resolution cameras that were basically built around speed and performance for capturing action. With this camera, we stepped that up. We have a 45.7 megapixel backside illuminated stack sensor. This is pretty impressive because now we have a sensor that we can shoot landscapes with and high detail kind of shots with that gives us that resolution, but it also gives us a high ISO performance. Now, what I was impressed with this camera is that I was able to go down to a base ISO of 64 and get some amazing quality details with no noise effectively. So on top of having a brand new sensor, something else that's really revolutionary is that this is the first camera to go away without any shutter whatsoever. Now, with other cameras on the market, you've been able to use electronic shutter, but this one just does away with it completely. And that's because of this sensor's readout speed. It is so fast that there's really no need or benefit to having a mechanical shutter. In the past, when it came to strictly electronic shutter, we had to worry about things like rolling shutter and banding, for instance, under fluorescent lighting. Now, Nikon has done an excellent job with this, and we had the flicker control on during most of our testing in these different demanding light situations, and it did an excellent job of countering that. You didn't have to customize it, it was just working perfectly. When I was in the book nook doing an ISO ramp up, as boring as that might sound, we started at ISO 64 and I didn't have the flicker control on, and I was finding I was getting some flickering as I worked my way up through the shutter speeds. However, when I switched to the flicker control on, I had no troubles whatsoever. The camera did a fantastic job of eliminating the flicker and only exposing for the highlight when the lights came up. Now, when it comes to an electronic shutter, something that we're concerned about is the ability to use a flash. Now, I'm happy to report that you can easily sync up to 1/200th of a second without any problem whatsoever. Nikon has done an excellent job with this. Now, one thing that does concern me is that without a shutter, there's no protection of the sensor. Something else I was very pleased that Nikon included with the Z9 is a shutter shield. So now when I'm changing my lenses, I'm not leaving the sensor completely exposed. I have a very robust shutter shield to protect it when I am changing lenses. Now, something else that does bother me a little bit is when you're shooting electronic shutter, you need some kind of feedback. At 20 frames a second, you can blow through a lot of product very quickly without even realizing without some kind of feedback. Nikon does give you the ability to hear an electronic sound when you are taking pictures. The volume is adjustable, and if you're in an environment where you need to be discreet, you can plug headphones in and only you'll be able to hear the sounds the camera makes. It makes for a very versatile camera that you can use in any kind of light situation.
Autofocus is where a lot of the cameras are kind of going head to head in their technology. We're kind of in this autofocus race right now. Everybody wants to have the best autofocus system paired with deep learning and tracking technology. And I'm happy to see that Nikon has taken their 3D tracking autofocus that was very popular and performed excellently in their DSLR cameras.
Now, Nikon's always had great 3D tracking in their DSLR cameras. The D850 was fantastic for that, but it was relatively limited to the sort of center section of the autofocus points. With the Z9, we have almost 100% coverage with 3D tracking of the entire viewfinder.
And of course, Nikon has put in more profiles than anybody else right now. And to see how this worked, we wanted to put it through some difficult tests because we had time with the camera. And so we brought it indoors to do some sports photography. So we did padel tennis.
Yeah, padel, which I've never heard of till now, and it was impressive to watch. But it's very fast action indoors, poor lighting, fast action, right? It's a torture test for cameras. So being able to acquire autofocus for a very fast-moving subject, and it performed very well.
And not to mention difficult subjects like swimmers, where their heads are kind of bobbing in and out, sometimes with their goggles and their swimming caps, they don't always look like people. But I was impressed with how well it was able to track and acquire focus on these swimmers, even when they're kind of rolling in and out of the frame.
Yeah. Now, I took it out trying to find some wildlife and some birds, and I found some seagulls, which were readily apparent. And I found one hawk, which was okay, but he flew the wrong direction. But I got some okay shots of it. But it was nice to see a camera just acquire so quickly, especially these smaller subjects that can be really flighty. Yeah, and the whole deep learning thing, I mean, it's such a big buzzword in the industry, but it's fantastic. It's basically profiling millions of photos and putting that into your camera to sort of find out what you want to look at. So it's not just finding a face or looking for a car, it's actively looking for the helmet or the eyeball. Like it's actually looking
identifying.
and analyzing the images, and it works fantastic.
The other thing that we really like is that it has an auto subject detection mode. And so if you're shooting a variety of subjects, you don't necessarily have to tell it that you're going to go after animals or people or motorsports. It's actually able to use all of the profiles in order to detect what subject you're shooting.
Now, all this greatest technology is pretty cool to play with. It's not infallible. I found certain situations. For instance, take a look at this duck photograph I was shooting here. If you look at the Adamus footage we caught from within the camera, it was actually capturing the duck's reflection in the water, not the actual duck itself. I thought that was kind of interesting. So I don't know if that's something that's going to improve in time with a full production copy of the camera, but it's something you learn to work with. These are high-performance cameras, and you have to learn how to fine-tune it to get the best results.
Yeah, so with that in mind, we did put it through some very challenging indoor shooting environments, and I was quite pleased with how the autofocus performed.
Yeah, I mean, when you hold the camera up to your eye and you have it for auto subject detection and it finds a person's face, locks onto their eyes from like a mile away, you're like, wow, like this is really impressive to have. Or if it tracks a bird through the frame, you just have to concentrate on keeping the bird in the frame and let the camera decide on the bird itself, and it follows it all the way out as it scatters all through the frame. It's amazing to watch, right? You know?
Kids these days, they're not even going to know how good they have it with these autofocus systems.
No, honestly,
right?
they don't. If you shot a camera from 10 years ago, you'd be like, man, this was amazing. Then you look at these cameras and you're like, wow, it finds the face and the eye for you. This is amazing stuff.
It's kind of like splitting hairs right now with a lot of the top mirrorless cameras right now. And I think that this camera has a lot of good bones. And we know from other mirrorless cameras that firmware updates are going to continue to improve it. But we wanted to talk to another camera expert. You may know his name. It's Rob Galbraith. And Dave had a chance to catch up with him at the Padel tennis match to see what his thoughts were.
So, were you excited when the Z9 was announced and some of the new features of it, like no shutter?
Absolutely. I mean, the specifications list of this camera is an absolute dream for a photojournalist or a sports photographer. Everything from the camera's body design to the frame rate to, of course, standout features like the fact that it has no mechanical shutter. That's all really intriguing and has the potential to really change the game. So
yeah, I mean, it's like a revolutionary kind of thing. It's where things are headed, we're seeing electronic shutters get better and better. Now, what were your concerns when you heard that there was no shutter on this camera?
Well, first one was about how well it would work with flash, but I have had an opportunity to try out a couple of different flash units with this specific camera, and it seems to sync just fine right up to 1/250th of a second. Well, actually at higher shutter speeds as well, with the illumination across the frame looks very even. In fact, it looks pretty much exactly the same as a D750, which of course is a mechanical shutter equipped camera. So my concerns, I would say, have been allayed in that regard.
Something else that's a concern with the camera is the viewfinder experience. Now, how have you found the Z9 for its viewfinder experience?
Fantastic. Easily the best I've seen in a mirrorless camera. It's so live, it's so responsive. And in conjunction with that, the pace with which the autofocus point moves around, indicating that what the autofocus system is detecting for an eye and a face, it's so impressive and really so different from any previous Nikon mirrorless camera I've used. Yeah. It's just a great viewfinder experience.
That's fantastic. Now, this camera is all about speed. Now, how are you finding the autofocus on this camera? We have the return of 3D autofocus with this camera. Are you finding the autofocus experience really good as well?
Certainly, it feels much more responsive than any Nikon mirrorless camera I've used before, and which is fantastic. And looking through the viewfinder, the autofocus does seem to be keeping up with moving subjects. Of course, we were just in there photographing some Padel. I think we decided it was pronounced that way. Yeah. And looking through the viewfinder, it does seem like the autofocus is doing the job. It's a bit harder to tell when reviewing the pictures whether the autofocus system is fully there. So I think I would want to spend some more time shooting with this camera before I felt comfortable saying that the autofocus system is as A, good as it needs to be, and B, as strong as what Canon and Sony are putting out these days.
Yeah, I mean, we're spoiled these days with the autofocus systems of these cameras. So yeah, further testing is certainly required, but it's one of these cameras I find you really need to fine tune what works best for you in a case-by-case situation.
Well, for me, though of course this camera, like like all other cameras these days, there's a plethora of autofocus modes, but the one that is most interesting to me in the world of Nikon is the 3D tracking with eye and face detection, because that is by far the most useful autofocus mode to be able to set a camera in when you're trying to capture fleeting moments, whether it's news, sports, or anything else. And so, yeah, there are all these other autofocus modes in this camera, but the one that I would want to spend the most time using, and the autofocus mode that I would expect the most of, it's that one.
Thank you for coming out and joining us for photographing pedal, which is the craziest sport I've seen in a long time. So I appreciate your insight into the new Z9, and I look forward to bringing it out to the next test.
Thanks very much. Thanks for having me.
It's always great talking to Rob Galbraith. Thank you so much for joining us and giving us some of his thoughts. And of course, I traded Dave in for a younger model to talk about video. And so, Drew,
yes.
Thanks for coming on this side of the camera with me.
Exciting.
Exciting. So it is exciting because, of course, the Nikon Z9 has some pretty compelling video features. First of all, because we were just talking about autofocus, what did you think of the autofocus for video on this camera?
It was shockingly good. Like, we've had some good autofocus systems, but this was so sticky. I dare say it was easily as good, if not a little bit better, than what I was experiencing when using the stills side of things.
Yeah.
I barely missed pretty much any shot, and especially when using the longer telephoto lenses, we were almost exclusively shooting with the 100, 400, the 70 to 200. Even when using those longer lenses, where normally it'd be a really challenge to try and keep everything steady and keep everything in focus, it was just flawless.
It's just rock solid.
Just rock solid.
That's great to hear, especially coming from someone that often has to resort to manual focus. When you're shooting, sports and action, and you're in these indoor environments, it's great to be able to have something that you can rely on. Of course, some other headline features on the video side of things are 8K video, internal recording. Can you tell us a little bit about your thoughts on the quality?
Yeah, the quality was amazing. Even with just the little sample clips that we kind of shot. A lot of it was on action sports, so trying to punch in made it really easy, and I kind of wish I was shooting it actually a little wider so I could really take advantage of that 8K and crop into the exact framing that I wanted. I don't think I'd be using it all too much for this kind of stuff. The file sizes are very
There
big.
are massive file sizes, and with that in mind, you also have the oversampled 4K option, which basically gives you the look of 8K footage, but if you're going to be down-resing it to 4K for YouTube or whatever your final product's going to be, if you have this oversampled 4K, it looks pretty spectacular as well.
And ProRes, which was
ProRes.
really nice to see. I'm really liking this trend towards having ProRes directly internal, as opposed to having to use like an Atmos or something to record it direct from there. So all of that is awesome. And even the 4K footage, 4K at 120 looks so good. And I actually, just to showcase, because everyone's like, oh, but the GH5 does 4K or 1080p 120 or 180 frames per second. So I shot them side by side just to kind of like showcase the difference between 4K 120 and 1080p 120, just to really drive it home. No, it looks so much better, so much cleaner, so good.
So good. And how excited are you that they're going to do a free firmware upgrade so that you can do internal RAW recording to the memory card?
Yeah, it's really exciting from a full-on video production standpoint. Again, what we're kind of doing here with YouTube and everything probably won't be using too much raw footage. So
come on, this is like cinematography masterpieces right here.
my computer can only take so much in terms of files.
You need to get Drew a new computer.
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, totally,
Okay.
Mac. But in all seriousness, this is a really compelling video production option for pretty much anyone. Log direct internal. The fact that 8K at 30 has such a long record time, yeah, we've had 8K before, but the fact that I could just go in, shoot as much as I really wanted, and never really had to worry about it overheating or doing anything like that. And I can't understate this. We were not in cold environments all the time.
No, we were in warm, steamy swimming pools and things like
Yeah,
that.
and it was still fine. It wasn't even getting warm to the touch, which was really impressive to see. So it's shocking. I never would have thought that Nikon would have actually come out with something this good for video. They've historically never been the video camera company.
No, but yeah, with mirrorless, it's really picked up, and it's great that they have such a compelling and professional tool. So thanks, Drew. Dave, The one thing we haven't talked about is the buffer. We liked the buffer. It's a nice deep buffer.
So the fact that we have, 2 card slots, both the CF Express Type B card slots, gives us tons of speed.
Yes.
Now, we put in the fastest memory card we could possibly find. It was the Delkin Black.
Very important
Right.
because it makes a huge difference.
And so putting it through the most demanding file formats, we did RAW plus JPEG fine, and we were getting 55 plus images in a row at 20 frames per second without any issues at all. If you step down to their compressed RAW files, right, we're talking like 3 or 4 seconds easily of 20 frames per second without any issues at all. And step it down from there and it's infinite. I mean, it's a high performance camera, and there's really not many situations where you're gonna be shooting 20 frames a second for more than 2 or 3 seconds at a time anyways.
Yeah, we can't stress that enough that you really want to have a high performance card to go with it. And so get the highest speed card on the market. The Delkin Black cards, like Dave was saying, seem to be the best so far. And as the higher end cards continue to come out, you'll be able to take advantage of that buffer depth.
Yeah, this is Nikon's Ferrari of their camera lineup. This is their high performance camera, so you have to put quality fuel in it. So use the fastest memory cards. Do yourself a favor. Yeah, they cost a little bit more, but yeah, do yourself a favor. Get the most expensive card. That's the fastest card for you. Dave's advice.
Dave's advice. Okay, and let's get into like why this camera is so awesome, because you could be a landscape photographer and use this camera because you have the 45 megapixel backside illuminated sensor. You also have a base ISO of 64, which is awesome to work in bright lighting conditions.
And that's the whole thing. This camera is so flexible. You go out and you're not, whatever you want to shoot, you have the ability to capture it. So you go out to shoot landscape and you're like, okay, I need 1 frame per second at best. But then you come across some amazing wildlife. You have the ability to capture some birds in flight with 20 frames a second.
Yeah, it's really not to be mistaken with Nikon's DSLR flagship cameras that were very purpose-built for speed, low light performance, and like sports and action photography. This could be used for so many different things. It has that versatility where a lot of image makers, professional photographers, enthusiasts, and video users will enjoy a lot of these features.
Yeah, I mean, I like the form factor of this camera. Yeah, I like the bigger body, and I like the fact that it has this really big battery. So battery life is great. I don't have to worry about it. I don't have to carry 2 or 3 batteries with me. One battery, was
one
great.
solid battery.
One great
yeah.
battery.
Really what it comes down to is the ergonomics, the feel that you like, and if it is checking off all of those boxes.
Yeah, I love the fact that how well it tracks focus, and the fact that they've taken it to the next step where it auto selects the subject for you. Just in case you come across something, boom, you're ready for it. The camera, you don't have to set it up and go, oh, I missed the shot because I was in human detection, I wasn't in animal detection.
Yeah, and we have to reiterate it that it's interesting that Nikon decided to totally pull out that mechanical shutter, perhaps giving them more space to be able to offer some of these features. Maybe it has something to do with cooling. We don't know the specifics, but we do know that it does keep up with what a mechanical shutter could give you in terms of flash sync speed. We weren't having any issues with banding or rolling shutter, and so it's been able to solve all of those issues that were present before when you had an electronic shutter.
Yeah, and I think we're going to see this trend in other manufacturers as well. I think the shutter is just a matter of time before we have no shutters.
The shutter is dead.
But you think about that, right? It's one of the major moving parts of a camera as well. So the longevity of this camera, right,
yes.
should last a lot longer. We don't have to worry about the shutter going down now,
That's true, especially when you're shooting like crazy high frame rates. I mean, those shutter mechanisms are gonna expire before you know it.
Overall, Nikon has really stepped up their game with this camera with some innovative features and some brand new technology.
Yeah, and the one thing we haven't touched on too much is the price point that this camera is coming in at. It is a professional camera, but if you compare it to their own flagship camera from the DSLR line, it comes in $1,500 less Canadian compared to the D6, and it's also substantially less than the other top-end cameras right now from Canon and Sony.
Yeah, it's a very attractive package, all things said and done. When you look at what you get for this camera for the price point compared to the rest of the market, it's pretty cool.
We're impressed. But of course, we want to know what you guys think, and so make sure that you comment below.
Follow us both on Instagram.
And if you're new to our channel, please subscribe and hit the notification bell so we can catch you again very soon. Ah.
There you go. I programmed them so that
And make an awkward noise.
Like an ostrich. Drop,
Yeah,
the beat. Drop the Z9 beat. Cameras are great.
Camera's good stuff. Photo slots. Kill computer.
It's cold, Drew.
All right. Real quick.
Okay. Hey, thanks so much for watching. I'm freezing, but if you want to watch some more stuff from us and you like what you saw, then click up here. And if you're in Canada and you want to support us and you can shop local, click down here to shop@thecamerastore.com.